Welcome to the Legacymakers podcast. At Legacymakers, we believe that family is the foundation of society. And if you can change a family, you will change the world. The Legacymakers podcast is dedicated to bringing you relative, inspiring, and educational content to help you build and leave the legacy you intend to leave. If this episode encourages you or inspires you in any way, please consider making a tax-deductible donation at www.chooseourlegacy.com. Thanks and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. So as you can tell, this is a special episode. I am not Ben Glassman. I'm his better half, Megan, and we actually have some other wives of the men who do this podcast. So why don't you guys just introduce yourself, tell us who you are and whose wife you are.
My name's Maxine Dardarian. My husband Fisher has been a guest on the podcast a couple of times. Stoked to be here.
And I'm Riley Appleby, and my husband is Ben Appleby, who also has been on the podcast.
Great. Well, thanks for being here, ladies. So we are, just going to dive into talking about the mission of motherhood. So that's, why the guys wanted us on here to have a little break from some manly discussion and hear what us ladies have to think. I'd love to just kind of share and hear from you guys what has been your journey of like finding purpose in motherhood. And when you first became a mom, was that something that you felt purposed in right away, or was that something you've learned over time, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think when I think back to the younger years of having just little ones in my house, I think finding that purpose was harder because it was so many mundane tasks and you didn't even have someone you could talk to during the day. It was just like baby. Just in the midst of the intense baby raising. And I think that was harder to find my purpose. But I think over time I grew into it. And especially as my kids have gotten older, I've been able to see the purpose of training them in God's ways and discipling them and teaching them in the ways they should go. I think that now has become like my passion, especially with homeschooling. I get to do it all day long. And totally. I think that's kind of given me purpose in motherhood.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that question for me, it strikes me because it reminds me of the question we were all asked when we were kids, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it just assumes that it's such a finite destination that we arrive to. And I think that that's a false understanding of, well, first, I think it discredits the journey, which much of motherhood is, which I'm sure we can all relate to. The mundane, the excitement, the joy, the sadness. So for me, much of what my journey has looked like in finding purpose has been about leaning in to those seasons where sometimes it just does not make sense. Like the dishes are stacked, the laundry's everywhere, and I just don't even recognize the person in the mirror. And while that may sound like just a really depressing reflection, it's also in those moments where I feel like that purpose that we're describing becomes clearer and clearer and clearer, like the refining of a jewel. Or, there are plenty of like analogies or metaphors I could give where like the refinement makes it much more beautiful. So I think that much of where I'm at with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old and a baby on the way is still in the thick of that and trying to be the best example I can be to my kids and understanding that parenthood at large is this journey of discovery and trying to constantly pursue that which is truthful and beautiful and meaningful.
Yeah, totally. I know for me, like, when I always wanted to be a mom, like you said, when you're little and you're asked that, like, I always wanted to be a mom, and I never really, like, imagined having this big career. Like, I just wanted to be a mom. But then I ended up getting married so young, and then we got pregnant right away. And so I think there was also this like thing in me of just wanting to do something, like make a difference in the world, or like have, I don't know, some sort of impact. And I didn't have my mind set on kids being that impact yet. And so I think for me, it was definitely like a process of, like, when we had our first daughter, I loved being a mom and I loved being with her, but I didn't feel really purposed in it. Like, I think, yeah, like you said, the monotony of, like, babyhood was just like, how am I making a difference at all? Yeah. So it actually was through a mentor and through the title of this podcast, right, The Mission of Motherhood, is based, like, there's a book called The Mission of Motherhood by Sally Clarkson. And reading that book totally changed, like, reframed my mindset. And then I also had a mentor at the time that she was just sharing, like, things she was learning. And she told me how she was reading that verse in Matthew that talks about when Jesus is talking to the disciples. And he says how, like, if you visited me in prison, or if you visit someone in prison, you visited me in prison. If you took care of the least of these, you were taking care of me. You know that passage? Mm-hmm. And she was just saying how she realized that, like, children are, you know, needy. They're always needing. They're always needing to be fed. You're feeding them every day. So it's like every day you're doing these menial things that are actually, like, you're feeding Jesus. You're taking care of Jesus. And that was, like, a huge mind switch for me, too, of, like, wow, yeah, even these menial tasks that I'm doing, I can do them as if I'm doing them for Jesus, which gave me so much purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think also, like you said, like, just laying down those expectations of these other things have priority over, like, motherhood, you know, like, outside of, like, feeding into my marriage, like, my kids come next. So once I, like, changed my priorities, then I was able to kind of let other things go and not get frustrated as much, like, viewing them as distractions, but actually as, like, they're my mission, like, this is my job for today.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, like, our culture today is so, makes motherhood seem so menial. Yeah. Right? And not like it's something of value, but there's, like, this facade, I feel like, of, like, people saying, like, oh, motherhood's the hardest job in the world. Or, like, they try to praise motherhood, but then in actuality, I feel like it's very, seems like a burden. Yeah. What would you guys, like, what are some things that you've seen are, like, how the culture portrays motherhood versus, like, what the Bible actually says about it?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind first, I want to touch on something you just described as this irony, and I actually think contributes a lot to my journey. I do not think that having children, I'm about to quote Josh Craddock, an alum friend of mine who is amazing, and people should look into him if they're interested in pro-life movements and so on and so forth. But he has this famous quote that starting a family is not this capstone, it's a cornerstone, and your life doesn't just end when you have children. However, there is this, like, almost acceptance of certain things that were once exciting, such as traveling or going out to a restaurant, or, I mean, I can think of plenty of things where people are just like, it is way more difficult to bring the kids. Like, we're just going to tap out. We're not doing that anymore. And my family is actually, like, pretty in opposition of that. Our effort is to try and normalize children being a part of society. And part of the way that we do that is we travel with them. They are on airplanes. They go to restaurants. They run around and they play. And they are known because they should be. They should be known and they should be seen. And so for me, like, when it comes to what the Bible says about motherhood and how I experience the role of motherhood and the responsibility of raising these tiny humans and these young minds, always boils down to, like, that which I'm also pursuing the world and the ways in which I am acting within the world. And I'm their first teacher. So if I am not living out in a way that is, like, reflecting my values and our family's values, how on earth could they possibly understand the importance of such values? And you really have to break it down like that with kiddos, because it's like, you know, they learn colors and letters and the most foundational elements of, like, our existence from us or from observation, which is oftentimes from us as well. So for me, it's like, what does the Bible say about being loving, right? Because that's what our children need first and foremost. What does the Bible say about discipline and righteousness and what it means to be holy? That strikes the heart. And I think that those questions are where moms really need the support, because that discovery is a huge responsibility. We know we have the perfect example of a father. I mean, I'm not going to put my son, I'm not going to give him up as an offering as quickly as I felt like, the Bible shows examples of, right? I mean, it's unfathomable to imagine the sacrifice that we have been displayed and are gifted. And so for me, it's oftentimes challenging myself to be a better example of Christ to my kids, and that's like the main ingredient in motherhood. If I'm not right and I don't know how to show my children and to display to them making right my wrongs, then I'm robbing them of a really, really important lesson that they will take, into their like adulthood. So a practical example of that is I say sorry to my kids when I mess up. When I yell, I ask for forgiveness. I ask God for forgiveness in front of them. Sometimes I ask them to join me because oftentimes they contributed to why I yelled. Or, the mistakes can be grand or small. But I just think that the application and the involvement is so pivotal.
Totally, yeah. I think, so what you said reminded me of this quote from Sally Clarkson that says, "The hard, daily, repetitive work of making a home a haven, providing healthy meals, correcting and training little ones, and constantly cleaning up messes is perceived as menial labor instead of the stuff from which godliness is built." Like how, like you said, it refines us as we are shaping them, and how, we become, more Christ-like as we are mothers, which I think is so valuable. Such a valuable part of the role of a mom that is so often not talked about. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I agree. Like when I was thinking about what Maxine said, like I haven't so much experienced a negativity in culture towards motherhood as much as towards children in general. And I think especially, having a large amount of children, often comments are made, and some are just like funny people trying to relate to, but then there are others where you can see very distinctly that, children are viewed as hard, hard work, and they are, but I think our society views hard as bad. And like what you're saying, like if we look from a biblical perspective, actually our children are these gifts and tools to train us. And I think that is why God says children are a blessing. Like I really do believe that, because if we lean into that hard, we can become more like him. And really that is our goal, right? And so, I think latching onto that, like hard is not the same as bad, and hard is our refining, and our gift is the perspective that we have to hold on to.
Totally, yeah. It makes me think of that verse in Psalm 127. It says, "Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb of reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate." Which, like, that last sentence, it's so funny. I just feel like often when we go out with lots of children, like, we are put to shame almost in today's culture. Like, wow, that's a lot of children. Or like, oh, you have such a handful. Or, there are people are always saying, like, oh, I was at the grocery store the other day, and this guy was like, are your kids in school? And I said, oh, my oldest is in first grade. And he's like, well, we homeschool, so they're always with us anyway. But he said, oh, well, hopefully you'll get a break soon, like once they're all in school. Like, well, it's just like that's a common thing of like wanting a break. Like you just need a break from your children, which of course, as moms, breaks are great, but that's not like my goal in life is to have a break from my children. And it's not something like that. It's not like in the Bible times it says they shall not be put to shame because they have so many children, right? And so it's like such a gift and a blessing.
Well, Shay Elliott from the Homemaker Chic podcast quoted a mentor of hers saying, if you need so much time away from your children, I would urge you to try to raise people that you would like to spend more time with. And it was such a guttural, she felt very guilty hearing that. And she reflects on this in the podcast is an eclectic kind of view on homesteading, which is really exciting. But nevertheless, she talks about motherhood quite often. And that quote struck me. There is a difference between reprieve and distance. And sometimes I think that there is some truth that society's depiction of children and them being so difficult is just feeding into this unwanted truth that then eventually seeps into our souls and becomes accepted. And then before you know it, parents do want distance from their children because they don't enjoy being around them. Instead of, harboring that responsibility to raise them into people that they actually really quite enjoy spending time with.
Totally.
Well, because the training is so hard, especially in those young years, it does require so much work. So I think, as moms, do I always want to discipline in these inconvenient times? Discipline never feels convenient or something that I would love to do, right? But then it's required. Especially I think if we aren't going to be put to shame by our children, we have to train them in the ways that they should go because they weren't born to know those things.
The saddest form of discipline for me is just when I call it and we leave. I want to hang out with your friends' moms too.
Totally.
But we're calling it. We're done. We're going home. And that's because, my words must matter because your words matter. If I can't put action to my words, then how can you trust what I'm saying? So that's for me, I get sad, right? Because as your kids start to get older, they start to have friends, they start to enjoy play dates, and then you thoroughly start to enjoy those times too because you get to be with friends. But the discipline's never at a convenient time, and I think that that's true of a lot of those growing experiences in motherhood. However, it's what are you gonna do when the rubber hits the road? That's what's going to shape the direction of your family. Yeah.
What have there been moments in your guys' life where you have kind of lost sight of being purpose in that? Or what are the things maybe even in just your daily life that distract you from being purposeful in your discipline, in your training, and your discipleship of your children?
Yeah, I think it's a regular thing, especially with different ages, different kids. When you're not just having one child anymore, you now have an array of discipline issues. And I'm reading a book right now, M is for Mama, and she talks about boot camp parenting, which I just think it sounds kind of intense, but it is such a helpful tool that I've used in the past, but maybe not as intentionally and didn't have a name for it, but honing in on a pain point, right? Because when I look at my 9 kids, there's a bunch of different things that, need to really be looked at. But when I look at it in the big picture, I can get overwhelmed and almost feel oh man, this is insurmountable.
They're all just crazy.
They're all just off the line. Yeah. But if I can choose 1 or 2 things and hone in on them for a week and say, I am going to be so consistent in this issue. For example, my 4-year-old girls right now are just so sassy, and the way that they speak, it's not going to change in a week, but I have committed this week that anytime you speak to me in an unkind tone, you're going to a timeout, or I will not respond to that. And I feel that will aid me as I continue. I may not be as intentional next week on it, but it's those building blocks.
The habit of you being on top of it more.
Yeah. So just having a reset, even at the beginning of each week, kind of what Legacymakers process does is honing in, what is my goal this week for discipline, or what is my goal this week for training? Because when we go into the week without purpose, even little specific purpose, we can kind of lose our way a little bit.
Yeah, that's so good. I know we've just recently had a similar conversation of realizing that our kids, it was brought to our attention that our kids are have been breaking a lot of things of our own and of people's. And so we're like, okay, we really need to focus in on that one thing. It doesn't matter the rest. Of course, stay on top of normal discipline things, but like that is our main focus moving forward until we can get a better handle on it. Yeah, totally.
For sure.
I know for me, when I'm like just in seasons of stress, or like if there's a lot going on outside of the home, in terms of work or social life or anything, and there's just a lot of other things occupying my mind, it's easy to put the kids to the side and always have these other things in my mind instead of focusing in on what I need to be working on with them, or how I want to build into them, or even being creative in what we're going to do together or anything. Then those are the things that really distract me a lot from being purposed. But it's like I think it's like in the reading the books or like different podcasts. I mean, there's a bunch of great podcasts that help keep me back focused in on being intentional with them. That's been crucial. Yeah.
So we found out we were pregnant with our first, like, a surprise, right? So motherhood just kind of like appeared. Mm-hmm. I remember wanting to be a mom. I remember enjoying being a part of a big family, big by silly American standards. I was one of 3. But I never thought through the trajectory of what that was going to look like. I went to business school in New York City. I started multiple businesses. I was very career oriented. And I would say, insofar as I am today, that it is important to me. My work is important to me. It aligns with our family's vision of giving them practical examples of the way in which we are going to address these very important subjects in our lives, right? I vividly remember acknowledging at the sounds of joy. I vividly remember acknowledging this season where I was certainly putting my children on the back burner. And that acceptance was this very gruesome, painful reality of having to humbly acknowledge that it was the truth, first of all, and like what that does to you mentally, physically, and emotionally and spiritually. And then subsequently identifying the solution, right? What has to change? Like, what are the practical decisions that must be made? And at this point in time, I was running a pretty successful event business. It was cross country. We did 30 weddings a summer. I mean, it was a busy, busy life. And the Lord called me to just close the doors. And I don't think that type of sacrifice is what we experience regularly in motherhood, but that was the call that I was being led to. And by leaning into it and finally accepting it, I actually felt so much peace and was welcomed into the most beautiful season of my life that I really, really treasure, of being a stay-at-home mom for about a year before I went into work again. But for me, I think that there's this element of humility that I want to highlight that will come and go into those distractions like we've discussed all the time. But some of the times it requires a larger sacrifice than we may realize. And sometimes the opposite is true, where we think that we could just put the phone down, when really maybe we should be challenging ourselves to something bigger, So I think that's how I've experienced the distractions of other priorities and pulling me away from motherhood. It just constantly is coming back to this refinement and allowing my family to participate in the healthiest, amount possible of that journey, so that hopefully my daughter can, to some extent or the other, at least know that she can always come to us when the time comes decades down the road, when she's kind of juggling faith, career, family, and know that I'll understand. Mm-hmm. I hate that feeling of feeling like I can't go to somebody because they don't understand. Like, I want to just reject that in every which way. Like, I think that if my kids say that in 20 years, that would break my heart on like any subject, because we should be open vessels for them. So that's where I think I've struggled in the past.
I think something that's like unique about our mothering in our time too is that there's so many moms that work that are like stay-at-home moms, which absolutely are. They stay home with the kids and they also work like from home.
Stay-at-home working moms.
Yeah. And like I think Maxine, like you are like that, and I mean I guess I would be too. Yeah. I work very part-time, but I guess I'd be like that too. So I think that'd be interesting to hear too, like what like encouragement, Maxine, would you have for moms who like are working and with the kids? And it's overwhelming. Yeah. I mean, I know for me it's overwhelming having both. Mm-hmm. So just like how to stay in it and like balance both and let kids see the struggle of both, mm-hmm. but like see them as really the most valuable over work too.
The advice that's just coming to my head is that you are also a daughter, right? Like we are children to a God who loves us and who created us in a very specific way. And the desire to work, albeit maybe practical to some extent, is also rooted in something more, right? Like for me, being around beauty, working physically with my hands, creating beautiful things feeds my soul in a way that is divine and supernatural. And that period of time where I was like, how on earth can I quit my job? That's what I came to accept, was that I do not need to feel shame or frustration that I like working, that I want to work. Mm-hmm. The lesson is reorienting my priorities so that my family never, ever gets put behind work, that they are always going to be at the forefront of it. So my advice, I think, practically would be, as simple as like a very serious reflection as to whether or not you are working and putting your family, like what is getting put first? Are you going to take a call when your child's screaming? Like, I'm talking like the most practical examples. Like, think through the way in which you make decisions subconsciously. Mm-hmm. This is obviously like for the stay-at-home working mom, mm-hmm. which technology and the creative spaces have allowed for plenty of enterprise and opportunity. I think you would be surprised at how much you actually are putting work first. At least for me. So I think that my practical piece of advice would be like to have that humble reflection. Mm-hmm. And then my second piece of advice would be then to hug yourself in grace and mercy as if it's the Father hugging you in those ways. Like know that there is nothing like you can do that's going to like make his love for you go away, and that now you have been given a gift. The gift of knowledge and the gift of understanding. And now you've been given a choice. How are you going to change your ways, or how are you going to, make it so that your family comes first? Mm-hmm. And it's, again, that refinement process. And it's something that hopefully and realize, like when the flags are coming up that you're starting to put the family in the back burner, you'll be able to notice them and prevent them from happening again and again. And I know that if you want that, if that's the desire of your heart, like, and you bring in support and accountability to ensure that that is the case, that your family comes before your work, it'll be much, much easier than trying to do it alone. Mm-hmm. And so that would be my advice, is just to like really try and be honest with yourself, and then really try and practically create a plan to make it so that you don't do it again. Mm-hmm. Even though you will, but you just have to have enough grace to recognize that this is a part of the process. Mm-hmm.
Totally. We're always learning, right?
Yeah.
Always learning and growing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think kind of one last thing I think it'd be cool to talk about too is just the so what actually inspired us talking about this is I was talking with Ben about what we do with Legacymakers, right? That as a family, we come up with this vision and this mission for our family. And dads have so much, I think that dads have so much power in making that happen in the family. And they are like the carriers of that vision. But I was just telling him, I think it's like really the moms who live it out, like, right? It's the moms who are with the kids all day, who are making the choices of how we're spending our time all day, of really the moms plan schedules a lot more than dads. And so I think just seeing like how much influence moms really have, and specifically with leaving a legacy, I think moms just have such an avenue for influence in that and in guiding the home. So I'd love to just talk about like how you've seen what the influence and behind your mothering is, and how you have used that, or tips that you have for how to really step into that in your home.
Yeah, I think I just am kind of going back to, I think it's actually in part aspirational, as I feel like I'm just starting to like live more intentionally each week, but just starting my week out with a focus, right? Because I feel like what we got from Legacymakers was a focus, where we're going, a goal. So if I start each week that way, even bringing out, our family mission and values, and then looking at what does our week look like, it can act as a grid for what we should be doing with our time, because there are so many distractions. Like even like what Maxine was talking about with working in the home. I mean, I feel like I can relate to that just simply with like work around the home, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
It's so easy for me to put things that are my priority first over seeking what God's priority for my week is, or for what God's priority for my day is. So I think
like cleaning the kitchen instead of like sitting down and reading a book with the kids or something.
Yeah, I mean, for that one, it's like, I think it's like the kitchen has to be clean so we can eat lunch. So I've had to kind of figure that one out, like, yes, there's times where you leave the dishes, but I think especially with like a family that's as large as ours, like I've realized like actually if the dishes don't get clean, like we won't have anything to eat on in an hour. So it is like this interesting balance. So maybe it's like instead of reading the book, we're doing the dishes together, right? Or getting creative. But I think even if it's like organizing something or getting my homeschooling checklist done on a day where I really should see that my kids are struggling and we need to focus on disciplining. But I think for me, waking up in the morning, reading the Bible, and then just asking God to direct my day and direct my week. And my aspiration is to find ears to hear that, like even amongst the loud and the chaos.
Yeah, that's great. Maxine, did you have any thoughts about that?
It's an interesting question because I think our home life is it's non-traditional. My husband has always worked from home pre-COVID days. Mm-hmm. So have I. So we've always been very hands-on together. There are a few times in which I feel like I'm bearing the mission of execution, like you've described, of our vision as a family, alone. I mean, there are times that I can think of, but I would say, the Pareto principle, 80-20, 80% of the time, Fisher's right next to me, and I know that we are really, really blessed, and it is a privilege to have that type of camaraderie and partnership and just, frankly, availability.
Okay, I have a twist to the question for you then.
Okay, twist it.
So, just like knowing you guys, Fisher's like the most like calm, level-headed, mellow guy ever. And I know, like, you have more emotion.
I'm not.
You're more fiery.
I'm not. It's okay. God loves me. He made me this way.
Yes, and it's a gift. And you're paired together beautifully. But I think, too, something that I think Ben and I have a similar dynamic. So I think something I've noticed, too, is even how moms, like, set the tone of the home. And, right? And so if I'm, like, very fired up, that it affects everybody.
I'm so happy you twisted the question for me, because that, I think, really comes at the crux of my experience with looking at our family values and our mission and appropriately, living it out. Like you said, I am you said you're going to do it, you got to do it type of personality. Mm-hmm. I struggle with the the patience and the, right? Like patience, it's like a long suffering. That's like the meaning of patience, right? So I vividly remember like the first time I looked that up because I just like obviously didn't understand. Like I did not understand what it really meant to be patient. And I think that I'm still learning that. I mean, in many ways, I have children and chickens and dogs, and my parents live with them. Like I've got like a lot going on. So I guess to some degree I have some form of patience nailed down. But when it comes to the leadership of our home, Fisher's the leader. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's the leader. My personality and my demeanor may in many ways appear more forefront, but I got to lay it down sometimes. And there have been experiences in our journey of parenthood where I've just really had to zip it. Mm-hmm. And I've really had to lean on him to make the call, not necessarily because I couldn't or I didn't understand or I wasn't, like capable, but because that is his role in our home. He's the leader. Mm-hmm. And together we lead, yes. But I think how that contributes to my role as the mom, right, and the way my personality is important because it's, right, I'm on a stage where my kids are now seeing who I am. They know who I am. Mm-hmm. And maybe to some eyes that don't see the way we do, churn that off. And maybe to some it may appear as like an unwillingness or an how can I describe it? Like a forced sacrifice or something like that. But it is so not that. It is so not that because what I've come to learn is that as a mom, you want to solve everything because you don't want your children to be in pain. You don't want your family to suffer. And our hands are constantly in the grain, so to speak. We are tilling the soil of our homes because that's what we do. And sometimes the worker needs rest. Mm-hmm. And that's when I have found that the kind of like laying down my throne, so to speak, has served us honestly so much better. Because like you said, Fisher is so even-keeled. He's so level-headed. And he sees things clearer when I don't. Mm-hmm. So, in many ways, it's something that comes naturally now. But in the beginning, was hard. And I would actually even go so far as to say, for the dads listening to this episode, that was actually kind of hard for Fisher, too. Because he married me because of who I was. He liked that I was, like, gung-ho and whatever. And he kind of had to, like, get past that sometimes, like, he needs to be the one that speaks up. Mm-hmm. He needs to be the voice that the kids hear. Because he's just the one that the kids need to hear from right now in this moment on this subject. I could think of plenty of practical examples, like body parts with young boys. Like, what I mean? It's just a much more meaningful thing to come from my husband right. than just me, although he hears it all the time from me too. Like, mm-hmm. Privates are private.
Yeah, good lesson.
You know what I mean? It's just, complex. So I think that's how it at least applies for us and our like kind of unique dynamic that we've got going on at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this book I really love called Raising Passionate Jesus Followers, they talk about the father as I'm totally going to get it wrong, but it's something like the father as the lamp and the mother as the light, and that how you work together to bring instruction and teaching. And so I feel like what you just said reminded me of that, of like it's a shared role and you each step into those things in different ways.
That's more inspiring than the My Big Fat Greek Wedding. The wife is the neck while the husband is the head. The neck is what tells the neck to churn.
Yes.
I'm Egyptian, so I have to drop the My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Oh, great. Well, is there anything else you guys want to add or any helpful tips you think would be helpful for people before we close out? Good.
I have one thing coming to my mind. One thing that I like when I'm looking at, like, I had a friend over this weekend who's pregnant with her first baby. And, I mean, she's reading the blogs. She's following the Instagram accounts. She's asking all the questions. She's trying to be as prepared as possible. And without limiting or, like, making her feelings feel that they're not as important, these fears and whatever, I said to her, some things you will not feel prepared for even when you read all the books, ask all the questions, talk to all the moms, because you have to like live it. And so the last thing I want to say is that living it part, it does become easier. Like when I look at like motherhood on like the grand scale, like aerial view, like I'm like really proud in knowing that some of the stuff that was hard for me years ago is not hard for me anymore, right? I don't know if you can say that too, but like there are like new challenges, but there's also this stride that's like really beautiful. It feels like a dance. And like when you see other moms in it, it's like you can see it, you know, it's like it's a very exciting feeling when you feel like you've gotten the grasp of it. And I don't think that there's like a finite point, similar to my question I began with of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? But I would just say that it does come to the new mom out there, the young kids. I have young kids too, so I guess I'm speaking to myself. But like, you know, there are things that become easier, and the joys just are felt even deeper, and it's a very beautiful journey. So don't wish any of it away.
Yeah, I think the one thing I was thinking as like that came to mind as you were talking to is like for me is being okay with things not working, like things that used to work, or just it is a job. And so you can almost like love that part of it, right? Like see those challenges and pray and seek wisdom and try to get creative on how can we make a change? How can we work towards something that will work in one of these scenarios? Because I think at times I can get overwhelmed by how many things feel like they're maybe not flowing, or like not creating a peaceful environment, or just all the challenges that are presented on a daily basis. So I think being flexible and not feeling like you failed just because you have all these difficulties come up, but knowing that like the Lord will guide you, and it may be a season that they're hard, or maybe a week that they're hard, but that it's okay that we can lean into this hard and grow from it.
Yeah, that reminded me of just thinking too that like it's never too late to change. Like you don't have to surrender to the challenge, or like surrender to like, oh, this is how my kids are always going to be, or this is how our family will always look. Like you can always pray. Like praying is so essential in everything we do as moms. But then, learn, read, grow, and figure out, try something new. Yeah. You know, try something new with your kids that you haven't done before that will maybe shape them in a new way.
Yeah.
And
Or maybe it won't. Try something else.
There's so many resources out there to help us. Yeah.
I write letters to my kids. Like I send them emails. I have email accounts for them, and I write them letters about just the difficulty and the joys, and like in the midst of it, like really bad day, I'm sitting on the couch and I'm going to tell Jude like how difficult it was, you know, and he won't read these things until he's, 18 or a parent, but I so wish I had that. Like I had that like really kind of nuanced reflection of my parents when I was a kid, like how did you get through it, and so that helps me a lot, because it helps me exercise like a real understanding of what's going on. Sometimes we can make up lies in our heads of how bad things are. Sometimes the opposite is true, and we're lying to ourselves and things are really actually quite difficult. But I think that like narrative therapy is so helpful in that way, whether it's talking to a friend or, journaling.
What a gift for your kids too, that like, I think there's going to be those moments that were maybe they stick out in their mind of when you were maybe really angry or something, and they could see you process through it.
That's my prayer. Like my prayer is that this is a grace, like a blanket of grace, and that like it hopefully fills some squiggly lines that they have. We all have those.
Totally.
So,
yeah. Well, thank you, ladies. I wanted to close with one last quote from Sally Clarkson's book. It says, "Few things will last after we die, but our children and their children will live throughout eternity. What we do as mothers, therefore, has eternal significance." So just take that with you as you go wherever you're going today, and just remember that what you're doing as a mom is so important, and a dad, if dads are listening, is so, so important. And yeah, thanks for listening. If you want to, leave a comment, rate it, tell the guys that you like us better. That'd be great. Sure. But thanks for tuning in.
At Legacymakers, we are igniting a movement of families living on purpose so that every generation should set their hope anew on God. And you choosing to listen to this episode today is only going to further that movement and further the development of the legacy you will leave for generations. So thank you for being a part of that. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a legacy maker, go to www.chooseourlegacy.com, where you're going to find resources and tips and next steps to continue building the legacy that you intend to leave. You can also follow us on all social platforms at Legacy Maker Families. Thank you so much again for listening, and now go love your family.